Welcome to Nova History Remembered. I'm Paul McCrae. I grew up in Fairfax County, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., but until I was much older and studied local history, I didn't know there had been a large Army base right in the middle of the county. In 1898, the Army built a training camp for soldiers, which eventually housed 30,000 men. This was in a county of 19,000 residents. So if you thought this could lead to trouble, you'd be right. More on that later.
On February 15, 1898, the U.S. battleship the Maine blew up in the harbor of Havana, Cuba. No one is certain how it happened, whether it was a mine or some other reason, but public sentiment was that Spain, the nation who claimed Cuba as its territory, was responsible. President McKinley called for recruits to join the army to go to war against Spain, and the ranks were quickly filled. Many of the enlistees had grown up listening to fathers, uncles, and friends talking about their time fighting in the Civil War. Whether or not the stories included the horrors of that war, many young men felt that this would be their war and a chance to win glory. Now there were thousands of young men to turn into soldiers, and training camps had to be established. The area of Dunloring and Fairfax was chosen to be the first, probably due to the existing transportation infrastructure and proximity to Washington, D.C. Secretary of War Russell A. Alger had served in the Union Army in the Fairfax area during the Civil War and likely knew it well. Camp Alger would be named for him. The region had an electric trolley line which came to within a few miles of the camp, as well as a steam line, the Southern Railway Bluemont branch, which later became the W&OD Railway. Soldiers, supplies, horses, and equipment could be transported on the railways, and the Southern expanded their stop at Dunloring with 5 extra sidetracks. This was for stacking up train cars and unloading freight. Storage buildings were quickly built to store supplies before distribution. The camp became a large city as troops arrived and spread out through the countryside. Everything they needed had to be built, brought in, and set up. Kitchens, mess halls, corrals for horses, blacksmiths, even barber shops were set up. Because there was no time to put up many buildings, almost all activities took place outside. With more than 30,000 young men to train, the Army had a daunting task. Soldiers had to be taught military discipline, and from some of the photos at the time, the results were mixed. The citizens of Fairfax were likely thrilled to provide the Army with produce, supplies, wagons, taxi service from the remote trolley station, as well as other ways to boost their income, but they were less happy with the soldiers themselves. Just imagine 30,000 young men, many away from home for the first time in their lives, living in a camp environment that was quickly thrown together by a military which had not organized a gathering of troops this large in over 30 years. Hundreds of claims were made by neighbors due to stolen produce, chickens, turkeys, even hogs and cattle were taken from local farms. Farm fences were often torn down for firewood. The food provided by the Army was probably less enticing than what the soldiers found around the camp. There were reports that hardtack produced for the Civil War in 1864 was shipped to Camp Alger and fed to the men. Even when the troops went on long training marches, they scavenged along the way, leading to even more claims. The greatest problem at the camp was maintaining the health of the soldiers. Most homes in Fairfax had deep wells, but the Army didn't have enough time to dig those, so shallow artesian wells were excavated throughout the camp. Allowing the water to rise to the surface in these wells meant exposure to contamination and allowed mosquitoes to thrive. Malaria became rampant. Pit latrines were dug everywhere, leading to foul groundwater and well water. Creeks and ponds were used for bathing, which added to the unsanitary conditions. The Army started bringing in barrels of water from clean sources in Washington, D.C., but that wasn't a real solution. All food preparation and cooking was done outdoors in the heat of the season and exposed to flies and other insects. Dysentery, diarrhea, and typhoid became such a problem that many soldiers were too sick to train, and the goal of preparing men to go to war was not progressing as expected. The conditions leading to illness at Camp Alger were too great for the Army to overcome in the time they had, so Army units were sent from the camp to other locations to finish their training. Camp Alger was closed by the end of the summer in 1898.
What do you think about the way Camp Alger was handled? What could they have done differently? You can make comments below, and if you'd like to see more stories about the history of Northern Virginia, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell to be notified when new ones are released. You can also follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Nova History Remembered. Thank you for watching.